Founders, if your company cannot move without you, this is going to hit. Today's guest, Joe McClung, president of Floodgate Medical and 30 years of executive recruiting leadership experience in medical device, has seen inside hundreds of growth stage companies. And he'll tell you this, being the smartest person in the room isn't a competitive advantage. It is a scaling risk. He watched one strategic hire having 6 to 7 months off regulatory timeline, and he also seen one wrong hire quietly stalling a company. If you're still trying to be the hero in every function, this next part matters. Welcome to Provider's Edge, the podcast that helps healthcare entrepreneurs and innovators break down barriers and control their business, life, and future with valuable action steps. With me, your host, Sabrina Runbeck, a recovered clinician and a business deal catalyst. Let's rewrite the rules and create a positive social impact while increasing your profitability.
Joe is in the house today. He is the president of Floodgate Medical, an executive recruiting firm for the mission of improving the lives by uniting great people in the medical device space. And we all know, no matter what type of business we're building, if we're building it with the wrong people supporting us, we will never really move forward. So it's always about finding the right people in the right seat and working in that collaborative way. And Joe has been in the space for more than 30 years and was recognized as a best place to work and small business of the year in the Tampa Bay area. And with at least 14 years spent in orthopedic rehabilitation market, I'm just so excited for him to be here with us because you guys all know we value human capital so much. Whether you are going to invest in a company, we're always thinking about the people behind the company, right? Who's actually leading, who's actually doing the work, and not just shining bells and whistles behind people's names. And then also is about the expansion phase, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs, when you start, you want to find your co-founder, right? The chair where you can drive, you can do things that are be creative, have fun, create your legacy. But that co-founder relationship becomes very critical. So in any steps of bringing the right people together and also hiring the rest of your team is so critical. And that's why we have Joe here. Hi, Joe.
Hey, thank you so much. We just love being on here. And you're absolutely right. You know, there is nothing more important than the people you have. You know, I don't know if you're a fan of Dan Sullivan, but I like a lot of his work. And one of the favorite things is that it's the who, not the how, you know, and especially in entrepreneurs and starting in med tech, you get so many people focused on how do I do this? How do I get that engineering? But really is when you start asking that question, the who, that can find that can really make that impact is where you get that exponential growth, right? So, and that's really where we can make that impact, improving lives. Yeah, it's because you're not just improving lives of the people that get to work there, but in med tech, the beautiful thing, it's not sugar water, right? We're producing things that save people's lives. So you get the right people that get that flywheel going. They're making real changes that impact people. So it's awesome. Glad to be here to talk about it.
Yeah, we also love Dan Sullivan, who now help, because at the end of the day, it's really, can you find the who to help your bigger vision, mission to come to fruition? Mm-hmm. And one of the events that we just recently hosted for Women in Health Tech pitch tank, and with the panel of experts, one of the red flags that we discussed is we don't want a CEO, a founder, to be the only shiny star in a company. And if they are it, right? If they're truly just the shiny star, they don't have co-founders, executive team, or other people, project management, whatnot to support them. If that person burned out, if that person have to take care of their family, because a lot of us are in the sandwich age of having kids and elderly to take care of, then you got completely swayed away and things got tabled. So how do we need to think about, it's never going to be we have to do all of it. It's really about who in your circle, or you have to acquire this right talent to put in the right seat, and never feel like you're always in the deficit time then to find someone, right? And then we don't have that much time to even sort people out.
Exactly. I'll tell you the impact. I mean, you were talking about having, that exponential impact. We had two stories. One was a company that was getting into that crucial production, stage, and they needed more margin in the product, right? And so instead of figuring out how did they raise price, et cetera, we helped them find a head of R&D that actually was able to reduce that cost of goods 30%, and it was a better product. Right. So it achieved that by having the right who. Another one was a regulatory. They were getting through the regulatory filing. And instead of figuring out how do I do it right, they found the right who had done it, been down that path a few times, knew a couple of the right pathways and the way to file correctly, and ended up saving them, I think it was like 6 to 7 months on what they projected would be their regulatory approval. So it just, that's the type of impact you're talking about as a panel, right? And getting people. Not to mention, if you have a single leader that they have to do everything. I had a great boss one time who said, never be the single limiting factor of growth of your organization, right? If you're the only one that has to do everything, the organization is only going to grow as big or as fast as you can go. That's usually not that big. That's not what investors look for.
Exactly. And also the misconception of people who has a board, right? They needed the board to give them approval. And I never feel like that should be the hindrance. Those are your sounding board, which is great. But when they make a decision to say, for example, right, people always wait for, let us raise this amount of money before we do ABC, before we hire the next person, before we modify how we're showing up online, before we do all this. But what they're not thinking is, without the right people to fix all that, you're not going to get to the next level of raise, or you're not going to get to the next level of government approval, or perhaps all you needed is the right people to actually write the grant so then you can get accepted. But their thinking process is always waiting for something to happen before the right people step in. And then my question today is always, okay, if your goal is to achieve this in the next 2 weeks, who's helping you? How are you doing it by yourself if that's the case? And if you were needing help and you haven't been able to achieve it, how do you think you're going to be able to leverage your time on top of everything else to solve this one problem, right?
Yeah.
So at some point, all leaders have to figure out how are the rest of the board is supporting them, or they're just still thinking smaller than what they're actually meant to be. Right. So in those cases, how do you work with people in terms of not thinking about hiring a company like you guys, or people like us who are more on like, what is the best match, right? Like, how do we usually get people to realize that at some point you can't just always wait for the next check mark before you take action. You have to take action for you to get to the next checkpoint much faster.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if you can have the constrained mindset, you got to have that abundance mindset, right? That more will sometimes produce more, and being able to lean forward into it. I think tactically, there's a couple elements that I've seen some of our best predicate clients use, right? One of them is, and this is a methodology that has come through that the EOF methodology and some other ones, is to kind of really create that org chart when you're that $10 million company, right? Even though you're pre-revenue. What would that look like? And right now, as an entrepreneur, your name might be sitting in 8 or 10 of those roles, right? As it sits now. But you have them well defined. You know what the accountability, what needs to happen for that to be successful. And so that way, as you start to grow, it's real easy to look at that org chart with your face in all of them and say, you know what? This is a gap. I'm not being accountable. I do not hold myself accountable. I got to go find someone to do this, or we're never going to get home. And so then you start there, you know what that role is needed, what's expected, what that accountability is. You already have that plan. Now all you have to answer is, what's that culture? What are we building, right? As you're bringing on company people in, a lot of people index too heavily on experiential. That's important. They got to be there. They got to know there. You got to know the things. But taking a moment, not just understanding what experiences they have, but what culture works in our organization. Who's the best people I've ever worked with or currently in the organization? And conversely, who's the ones that didn't work out, right? What were they like? So that way you not only identify, you now have the accountability, what the job expects, right? Which kind of drives a little bit of what the experience is things. People usually nail that, but now you also have the cultural. Now you're able to go find that right person in the market, right? And I always challenge people is the initial is who do I know, right? How do I go do it? It's, in each role, there's a lot of people to be able to talk to. And as an entrepreneur, you need to make sure, or a company growing, you need to make sure not only you don't have just the talent that's convenient, but the best that fits you the best in the market. And that's usually where we come in, not only helping them shape those first identifications, right? What's really necessary, because not everyone has that nailed, helping shape that, but then ultimately being able to access the market.
All right, let's pause here for a second because what Joe just walked us through is something most founders learned the hard way. This isn't about being scrappy or figuring out the how faster. It is about realizing when you become the bottleneck. From regulatory to R&D to cost structure, the right who doesn't just save time. They change the entire trajectory of the company. And that shift, that's where real momentum starts. Okay, so if you are also someone who is an operator, service provider, or founder who has raised above Series B, then we would love to have you on our podcast. Go to theprovidersedge.com to apply to speak on our top 2.5 globally ranked podcasts. And appreciate so many of you for listening, for sharing the great message. And if you believe someone else truly need to hear this, please pass on our link to them. All right, let's get back to the second half of our show.
And I remember when I used to sit on the other side and I was a GM of a business unit or a vice president or a hiring manager at any level, I would reach out to 3 or 4 or 5 people and I'd be like, I did a pretty good job recruiting. But like all good things, it takes a lot of numbers and a lot of conversations to really find not just what's convenient, but what's best, And many of these times, searches, we're engaged, we're trying to, targeting 100 to 200 people, engaging 50 to 60 for referrals and conversations, really deep with 20 to be able to say, here are the best 3. I mean, that's the kind of really the end value that it takes to truly distill down the best talent in a market, And so if we do that right, that person's now going to have impact. And that's going to get you exponential, that growth. It's going to not only hit those accountability measurements, but blow them out of the water and allow you to get to that next level of abundance, right? Which is, hey, I got these other 7 roles I'm still doing. Now I can do these next. I can do the next. And pretty soon that flywheel is rolling. And getting those right people early on that bus to get that flywheel going correctly is crucial. I mean, I saw, unfortunately bad hires personally, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and tons of time. So getting it right, it's important, right? So it's absolutely can make or break great technology. We've seen it happen over and over again.
Yeah, both we know critically from if people are just thinking about a practice type of hire, any clinician is at least twice of their salary. And it takes forever for people to credential, right, in the medical field. In a business, it's more of in the first 90 days, we know probably at least 30 days, they're just still learning about what the business is up to, right? So if we can crunch that time shorter, help people to see exactly like you mentioned, there are set roles and set accountability. And even something that we do from executive onboarding, building out our advisory board is that what is the 90-day success plan, right? Like how can people feel the wins, feel the appreciation when they get on? Instead of they get that excitement, they wanted to jumpstart, and they have no idea what they're doing. They couldn't even figure out where is the best spot for them in the company. They just have this big vision idea. But if they're just too high level from a founder asking them to take something on, then they have to work so hard to figure out what does that
Mm-hmm.
mean, right? What
Mm-hmm.
resources? Instead of before they hire, they start looking into the internal people infrastructure of who's doing what in what way. Then you can either lateral shift or creating this perfect role with metrics. Then both sides will be happy, right? The new
Yeah.
people coming in will know, oh, okay, this is my metrics. I hit them. Great, right? Like there's the internal reward system for them. Same thing as the people who have hired, right? Now your managers, the CEOs and whatnot start seeing, okay, this is why I hired this person, right? I didn't just spend all this time, money to onboard someone and then they're not performing. And perhaps it's not thing to do with they're not performing, is that they're not seeing clearly to line the goals of what the company meant for. So how in you guys definitely been in business for so many years. How do you usually figure out that criticalness the matching thing?
Yeah, so you bring up a couple points, right, in that statement. I think one is really understanding that accountability early on. The Gallup survey, the engagement survey that shows, great employee performance. One of their key questions is, I know what's expected of me. People don't know what's expected of them. They don't know what good looks like, especially when they're starting, they're onboarding. It's really hard to create that engagement. So coming in, I think, is a great point of being able to be very clear when you're onboarding somebody is that they know exactly what good looks like, right? What's that 90 days? What's that 120? What's that first year objective, right? So when we're asking, we're onboarding a client looking for a role, that's a question we always ask. Hey, at the end of year one, what would good look like to you? So that way we can even start with that candidate early before onboarding to understand is paint that picture of what's expected. Because at the end of the day, people want to win. They want to know what the goal is, what the objective is. And if you're too squishy about it, you're not going to get the level of engagement and necessity you need. The second thing you talked about really is how do we find that match, right? I think finding that match is first going slow to go fast, right? Most people will jump in way too quick on the engagement of the candidate process. But to do it right, we really need to understand the client, understand the role, understand the need, understand the attitude. Many of our clients, we survey their leadership teams about what is the best attitude they've experienced, what is good, what is bad, so we can narrow down what that attitude is. We're going to find out what that first year good looks like so we can be more successful. And then once we've identified what, after that strategy call, we set the strategy, we set the type of archetype and type of people we're going to go after that has the experience, because you can't really see on paper the attitude, right? That has the right experiential sets that's going to be necessary to accomplish what they need and where they are and what their gaps are. And then we go out and connect. And that's where we use a lot of behavioral questions, our insights and understanding of the market to be able to identify not only truly have the experience, but they also have the right attitude that's going to be able to click with that client, and click with that organization and fill a gap, right? I mean, many times it is that dyad approaches where they have somebody that's a really good entrepreneur. They might need a great operator, for where they sit right now. And so we're really screening for a dude who has that operational function, examples where that has, so we can elevate those candidates that truly meet the gap that company needs, but also aligns to their cultural imperatives.
Yeah, it's all these a different fit, right? Like for us, when we start putting co-founders and executive team together, that's so crucial. And it's not just the behavior, right? The idea of how they present themselves. It's also their perception on communication. How do they see the world? How do they understand the world? And on top of it, what's the purpose alignment of the company and the existing leaders to align with these new people coming in, right? Because we're always going to have an idea of this is our goal for this role, but is that person coming in not just got super excited about the company as a whole, but they're actually aligning deep down who they are, what they truly meant to do with the company's mission, right?
Yeah.
And then there's so many other level of thinking about what resilient looks like, right? Because we all, as I mentioned, have different part of our life, right? This ecosystem of who we are as an individual, our family, right? Our community, right? Our mentorship, and now and career really is a legacy. Mm-hmm. It is a puzzle piece that's exciting to help people to get to that point, right? To grow with them, to see them flourish. like you mentioned. And when we're able to get the best match, it's not just growth and funding anymore, right? This isn't really accelerate, shorten up all the time that they have to figure out on their own or trying to play the game themselves of asking their entire network. And we also know, even for the people with the best intention, best personal referral, if there's not a true multiple level of alignment, then it's still not really a good fit
Yep.
for what's great on paper. So as we're wrapping up, finding out the best talent is one of the most crucial thing. And I say out of the three major spokes of a company, human
Mm-hmm.
capital is one of the biggest thing. And then the other is your social capital, how you engage, sell, get buy-in. And then for most people, they spend too much time on their own intellectual capital. This is my specialty, right? There's no competitors out there, but really is your who is making your solution product that much stronger, that
Yeah.
much no one can compete. And then it's about joining your who and your product to make the social change, right? The social buy-in. That's how the people who might not even have as much funding, but they are able to make a lot more revenue, a lot more impact versus the people who perhaps are really good at getting initial engagement and funds, but their progress is much slower, right? So it's all this interconnectability and really is about your who to make something super important, super sustainable in any economic ups and downs. What would you say is the best type of client you like to work with so those people can start reaching out to you?
Yeah. So, we really work with clients who see talent as their number one competitive. They see that talent and are willing to invest in it because we don't like to just come along and say, here's a candidate. We come alongside our clients as a partner. It's much more than the placement. And our objective is obviously to fill the role and find the talent they need for that role. But we want them to have a better, more effective talent engine for having dealt with us. Because we're not about the single search. Most of our clients, we've placed over 27 people with, right? So we help them build as an extension to them. And those are the clients that we love to work with because it allows us to fulfill our mission. We really see improving the lives of our clients, right? By improving the lives of those candidates. We know them well, find the right people and put it together. And that allows us to be able to improve the lives of my team, our community, everything else. And that is really our objective.
Perfect.
Okay, so this last part, Joe and I got deeper into the cost of waiting too long to hire and why we'll fix it later after we raise. It's one of the most expensive lies founders tell themselves. We talked about how one wrong hire can drain momentum, confidence, and time, and why clarity beats charisma every time. This is the moment where leadership stops being about hustle and start being about design. And guess what? There are actually fractional local tenant type of sales force that you guys can have, and it's very cost effective. So drop me a line on LinkedIn and we can discuss all the strategies to help you to get to higher conversion and sales without having to feel like you are losing an arm and leg to have more sales force for you. All right, so now I want to hear from you before we go to the rest of the episode. Tell us in a comment below wherever you're hearing this on Apple Podcasts, anywhere, or post it on LinkedIn. Make sure you tag me, Sabrina Runbeck, running backwards except with the E. If an investor asks you today, where are you currently having your bottleneck and what roles should never be yours in the first place, how would you answer that?
And so for companies that in that growth stage, I believe those are the best fit for you. And make sure you reach out to Joe. What would it be best for them to connect with you?
No, I appreciate it. It's in our website, floodgatemedical.com. I've got tons of information there. My direct email, joe@floodgatemedical.com, is an easy way to reach me. And I'd love to set up a conversation and call and see if we can, provide any insight into this most important topic of getting the right talent.
Appreciate you being joining us. For everybody listening, we would love to hear from you. How has your hiring and discovering process been look like? And when you did hire someone, what was the process look like for the next 90 days to ensure their success? We would love to continue to support you. Drop your questions on LinkedIn, share the post, or wherever you're hearing this. We can't wait to see you until next time.
If there's one thing I want you to take away from this entire conversation, it is this: growth doesn't stall because you are not smart enough or working hard enough. It stalls because at some point, you're trying to carry too much alone. Joe and I unpacked what really happens when founders wait too long to bring in the right people and how the right who can compress timeline, protect capital, and unlock momentum faster than any strategy tweet ever could. So let's break that down into the lessons here for you today. Number one, the fastest way to slow down your company is to be the smartest person in the room. Founders often confuse control with competency. When you try to own every function, regulatory, R&D, hiring, fundraising, you cap growth at your personal bandwidth. Your company don't scale because founders work harder. They scale because founders stop being a limiting factor. Number two, who, not how, isn't motivational, it's operational. Joe makes this tangible with real example. The head of R&D reduced costs of goods and improved product quality. A regulatory leader saved 6 to 7 months by knowing the right pathway. This isn't theory. The right hire compresses timeline, protects capital, and accelerates trust with investors. Number three, waiting to hire after the raise is backwards thinking. Founders often say, once we raise, then we'll hire. But Joe and I both see the opposite. Without the right people, you don't get the raise. Talent isn't a reward for success. It is prerequisite for it. Number four, bad hires don't just cost money, they steal momentum. A single run executive hire can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, 6 to 12 months of lost execution, and founder confidence and the team morale. The real damage isn't financial, it is time and trust. The two things early stage companies cannot afford to waste. Number five, clarity beats charisma in leadership. High performance teams don't need inspirational ambiguity. They need clear roles, defined accountability, 36 90-day success metric. We were just talking about a new fund that we're helping to launch. The challenge is when you get a lot of A players, amazing organization coming together, everyone wanted to help, everyone wanted to put their hands on it, but that also causes confusion. Now, same thing, the opposite. When you only have one founder that are trying to do everything, there's no clear definitive role, and even you feel like you're not there yet, a fundamental scalable structure need to be there. That means if you are wearing the chief marketing officer role, you have to write down exactly what that role entails, what are the performance metrics for a 30, 60, 90-day success roadmap, and how is that tied into your financial projection. So all of these things, when you're doing other roles, or you are your own clinical validation body because you are also a clinician, then all of these things needed to be written down and also puzzled in a way to say you're doing things in the right timeline and the right steps, and you're not switching between a R&D specialist to a marketing specialist to an operational specialist to your own project manager to your inbox specialist, right? You cannot be doing everything, and you cannot be constantly switching between all of them. So make sure you write down the roles and their true success metric and the time frame that you're supposed to use each of these roles, even though you are wearing those hats. So start scaling from day one. So by the time you have the ability to hire even as a virtual assistant, you can pass this thing on. So when people know what winning truly looks like, they engage faster, perform better, and stay longer. So let me ask you this. When was the last time a hire accelerated your momentum instead of slowing it down? What made the difference? Thank you for tuning in to Provider's Edge podcast. We hope you enjoy our latest episode and found the insights and tips helpful. We'd love to hear your feedback on the show and learn what topics you'd like us to cover in the future. So please take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and let us know what you think. Your feedback is essential to help us improve the show and provide you with the content you need to take your healthcare business to the next level. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.